Oh. I love the Zoom voice. All right, it is Friday, it is noon. That means we're talking climate. Welcome to the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition, Fridays for Future. I have just a couple quick announcements because we have a larger set of announcements that need to happen today, and I want to make sure that they have some time to do that. I guess the first thing is if you are not already, if you are tired of hearing me talking about Amitav Ghosh coming on Tuesday, then this is probably the last time you get to hear me make that announcement. Western Michigan University is bringing Amitav Ghosh virtually. He'll be giving talks on Tuesday. I'll put that link in the chat again for everyone. Book club is full, everybody. I really don't know how I'm going to navigate it. There are about 60 of us coming to a open Zoom book club together. Alan's going to help me. We got some stuff prepared. And then there's the public lecture that does not have any limit, right? So if you have not registered yet for that public lecture at 7 p.m., please do. It's a fascinating author and a really fascinating set of ideas about how history and colonialism and imperialism and racism all led us to this climate crisis that we're in today. And so I think for this group, you're just going to really, really enjoy that. I think the only other big plug, that I need to make today is that don't worry, you'll get all the fun emails from me. The city of Kalamazoo has released its draft community sustainability plan, and they are seeking feedback on that plan. And so I'll make sure I get that out in an email to you all today if you haven't seen that yet. They are looking for feedback. They're doing an open house this coming Monday, April 11th. They're doing an open house with feedback 5:30 to 7:30 downtown City Hall in the community room. And even better, Jamie McCarthy, Community Sustainable Development Coordinator, will be here for our next Fridays for Future on Earth Day, April 22nd. The noon to 1 slot will be them talking about that plan and a chance for us to have some feedback on it. So we'll get our own special session there for those things. And so just really quickly, anything like big, Food Waste Symposium, go visit Christina. I know I've been plugging that. Go see her in person on Saturday, Food Innovation Center, 224 Crosstown Parkway. Go downtown 10 to 3, check it out, food, music, all sorts of wonderful things. So I want to make sure I give some time today because you know that the other hat that I wear as a true political scientist is about voting. And if you've been paying any attention at all, you know that there are several petitions out there. There are several ballot initiatives. There's a lot of stuff going on. And so I was very excited to be contacted by Voters Not Politicians. And they're also working with League of Women Voters, Kalamazoo area, and what'd you say, like 19 other organizations are putting together a Promote the Vote. And I want to make sure that our groups, again, environment and civic and voting, these go together, folks. And we really need to all make sure we understand the petition situation out there, which ones you should be signing, and how you can help. And so with that, I'm very honored to have Jenny and Bo Schneider here from Voters Not Politicians to talk a little bit about Promote the Vote. And I gave them about 5 minutes to tell us about what's going on and how to get engaged. And we might just have to have you back, don't worry. No. And then don't worry, we'll get to Dr. Schneider, but Bo and Jenny, take it away.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Denise, very much. Yep, I'm Jenny. This is Bo. We are part of a citizen-led effort to protect our current voting rights and expand them in some really important ways for citizens across Michigan via a ballot initiative to amend the Michigan Constitution. So we are volunteers with Voters Not Politicians. I saw Mary Allen is also a volunteer with Voters Not Politicians, and Paul's wife Anne is also. So we've got a great group going. But as Denise said, this is also supported by the League of Women Voters, of which I'm also a member, and it's supported by the Michigan League of Conservation Voters, the ACLU, LGBT Detroit. There are 19 organizations working together on this, and many of those organizations will have volunteers in the field collecting signatures. Statewide, we need 425,000 plus valid signatures by the end of June to get this on the ballot in November for the people's vote. So there, you know what, I'll let Bo tell you of a few of the great things that this would provide.
First, this builds on 2018. Recall what the citizens did in 2018, redistricting, nonpartisan redistricting, no excuse absentee ballot, same day voter reg. So this builds on it. And the two big pieces here are, number one is to continue to modernize the election process in Michigan. And so this proposal, I think the single biggest thing that everybody would notice is we're going to add a third way to vote. All right, we've got at the polls on election day, we've got mail, and this would add 9 days of in-person early voting as a run-up to the election, like many other states have now. Michigan does not. So you go into your clerk's office or a voting center, you vote, run your ballot through a tabulator, and you're done. And so that, I think most people would notice that. But if you're an absentee voter, there would be some good changes here too. So absentee voters have to reapply for a ballot every election. And this would allow a voter to say, please always send me an absentee ballot, check that box, send it in once, and you will keep getting a ballot as long as you live at that address and are alive. So that's a change. Every municipality would be required to have at least one drop box. There would be an improved tracking system. So when you voted absentee, you could get a text or an email saying, we got your ballot. Oh, we checked your signature, it verified. And oh, by the way, the law would now require every clerk to immediately notify any absentee ballot voter if their signature did not match, so that they would have a chance to fix that. A small change, but I think a neat one, military or overseas voters get an extra 6 days for their ballot to arrive if they postmark it by election day. So those are the things that would modernize the election. The things that would protect the election results from partisan meddling. There are three big things here. Number one, any election audits would be conducted only by state or county election officials, no partisan outsourcing of election audits. Number two, boards of canvassers, the state and at the county level, must certify elections based only on votes cast. And if there are any concerns, those could always be dealt with through the courts, but no freelancing on a board of canvassers. And then finally, the Constitution would have broad language added to protect voting rights, and Michiganders would have, quote, the right to vote without harassment, interference, or intimidation. And so that would become the overarching law of the state. And then finally, our current ID requirement, which is we vote with an ID, but 0.2% of voters in general elections don't have their NID or didn't have one when they showed up. And they are allowed to fill out an affidavit and attest to their identity. And that current law would be baked into the Constitution. So I think those are the highlights.
Yeah, and it allows clerks to continue to accept donations from churches of space for precincts, and to accept donations for other things. This would also provide postage, pay for postage on absentee ballots statewide. So in our community, we're lucky because we have many of these things already. We have a great city and county clerk here, but many small communities do not have that. And so this would make it the law of the land statewide, every community. And I think that's, it would make it a lot easier for a lot more people to vote, which is the goal. So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, I see Deb put in the chat from the League of Women Voters, but again, all these organizations are working together, which also tells you, how strong this proposal is, and, really the civic organizations and the folks that know about this working together to tell you a lot about the coalition that's working on this. And thank you, Deb, for throwing that in the chat. The League of Women Voters has a kind of a nice, which ones to support, why, what all the different petitions are doing. How can we get involved and help you, Jenny and Bo? I think you might be looking for some volunteers.
Well, we're always looking for volunteers, of course. We have a lot of volunteers in Kalamazoo County. We've sort of just been given St. Joe County and Calhoun County too. So if anybody knows people in those counties specifically, we would love to add to that base. But from this group, we quickly get a few ideas for groups we should talk in front of, like we're doing here with you today, or events we should be at. We know of a lot of the kind of ones that everybody thinks of, but there may be other things that we haven't thought of. And then we do have the next 2 weekends, we have drive up signing events where anybody can come. This Sunday, 2 to 4 p.m. at Millam Park. And then the following Saturday, from 3 to 5 at the Kalamazoo County Democratic Party office on Westnedge near Whites Road. So you could spread the word about those. We're trying to get the word out via social media, and Voters Not Politicians is doing some text banking and other things, but and we're hoping to do more of those going forward right through the spring and summer. So
wonderful. And
Yeah.
folks should know the coalition, thanks to Citizens Climate Lobby, thanks Marianne, we're booked for the farmers market the 3rd Saturdays, and I've invited you to come.
yes,
You can be part of our table for a little bit on those days.
yes.
As well. League of Women Voters is an affiliate of the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition, and so we hope that I think that's probably a good place to get some of these types of signatures. And I'm going to look up and put the link in the chat for Earth Month, Kalamazoo Earth Day Festival. There's so many events this month that I feel like you could go to, and this message would be really, really well received. Anybody else wants to put suggestions for Bo and Jenny in the chat of places and things that they should be going to? And I'll try to get a link out later today to Voters Not Politicians or the League. They got a great puppy dog that's barking at the new fence installation at their house today. But I'll try to get a link out. If you can send me anything, you can send me about how folks can sign up to volunteer with you and help. I think would be useful for us. Yeah. And now you're muted.
Yep, now we're not. So I saw Christina's hand up, and I'm wondering if you were going to tell us about the Foodways event. Was that what you were going to?
I was just going to say, if I know it's tomorrow, but if you wanted to come, you can let me know.
Okay.
And that is a community event that we're hoping
Well,
to get quite a bit of turnout regardless the weather.
come with your petitions. Come find me. We're tabling there, and we'll host you there as well through our table. How about that?
Oh, wonderful,
Look at that.
wonderful.
And I'll put, here's Kalamazoo Earth Day in the chat. So many events this month. I feel like that's going to be a great place for you to go.
And we are planning to go to a couple of the cleanups in the Vine neighborhood. We've been working through the Vine Neighborhood Association to get kind of hooked up with those folks. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like any ideas where people will congregate who think like you. And we will get volunteers there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Jenny and Bo. I appreciate everyone's indulgence. Again, voting is my passion right after climate, and I know many of you understand that relationship. I think what we'll do as things progress, and once things are on the ballot, of course, we'll do some longer sessions that really then continue to explain what that language means and how you can participate and what we're really going to be voting for in that electoral system. Jenny and Bo, for today, thank you so much for coming
Thank
and
you.
making the plug and making sure that we are all on top of this midterm season that is approaching us faster than even I can comprehend right now. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Denise. Thanks, everybody.
I'm gonna
Absolutely.
stick around, just look at the chat. Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll have another bit a longer session on that. So to the main event, shall we? So with us here today is Dr. Susan Schneider, who holds degrees in environmental and mechanical engineering, her Master of Science from Brown University. She once led an energy efficiency project for U.S. Steel's Corporate Research Center. She served in the Peace Corps. She has her PhD from the University of Kansas, specializing in behavioral psychology. Her scientific articles cover topics like generalization, mathematical modeling of choice, and nature-nurture relations. Her award-winning book, The Science of Consequences, covers basic learning principles, their role in nature-nurture relations, and their full range of applications, including sustainability. The book received coverage in Nature and led to a 3-year international book tour. Well, we want to know more about that, Susan. A lifelong environmental activist, Susan has worked full-time on climate change for the last 6 years, co-authored 2 chapters in the new book, Making Shift Happen, Designing for Successful Environmental Behavior Change. She's given many climate change talks, co-founded her own local climate action coalition in California. We're very lucky to have her here in our community and have moved to Kalamazoo and to join our coalition here and to talk with us today about all the great behavioral research she knows about how to fight the climate crisis. Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Denise, and thank you everyone for all you do. And I am sharing my screen. Hopefully that is working. And There is good news about the climate crisis in that for quite a few years, we have already had the knowledge and technology we need to solve this problem. And I speak as someone who had a very good solar engineering course at Illinois Tech in the 1970s. And as we all know in this group, renewable energy now, of course, usually the cheapest option in most cases compared to all the alternatives. In addition to saving millions of lives, economists are in strong agreement that there will be huge financial savings if we do what we need to do to keep global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees centigrade compared to pre-industrial. I also don't need to tell this group that there are a range of very large obstacles, which is why we're still not on track. And you all know about that recent IPCC report earlier this week. So the upshot is, this is a behavioral problem. The big behavioral lever is policy. That clearly is what we need to focus our efforts on. And recently, well, like last year, I read this climate policy book, which is out, I think the last year or two. So I recommend that. And anyone who's interested, I maintain a list of about 50 of my favorite climate change and sustainability books over about the last decade, which is freely available on my book website. But what I'm going to be talking about today is what we can do at the community level using behavioral science to get these behavioral changes that we need. And this is actually a big chunk of the greenhouse gas emissions in this country. Depending upon how inclusive you are, and your metrics and all, I've seen figures ranging from 1/3 to 2/3 of our total carbon footprint. So we can really make a difference at this level. And this is the level that this book that Denise just referred to is focused on. Like she said, I co-authored 2 of the chapters. This is from the nonprofit I worked for 2 years and I'm still affiliated with. It's a 500-page guidebook. It's really intended more for professionals in the various fields working on behavioral sustainability, but it's reasonably accessible. An easier first step, though, for people interested in the behavioral science side is this classic, soon to be out in its 4th edition, which is substantially shorter and more accessible. Doug Mackenzie Moore just did a brilliant job. This is the main book that everyone knows in this very interdisciplinary area, and for good reason, very evidence-based. And this is the approach taken, and very sensible, lots of good examples. One of my main points, though, in this talk is going to be, at this stage, we have, hundreds and thousands of successful projects for behavior change at the community level across all sectors that we need to be addressing. So please, we're out of time now, we're rapidly running out of time, right? Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's use what's already out there, build on it. And there's a lot of resources out there to help us do that. I'm going to be talking about tools of change later on too. This is a website that goes out back, like Doug Mackenzie Moore's book, to the end of the last millennium, that has free resources. This is the other top choice that I recommend in my climate talks. This was written by people who were sustainability directors for big cities like Chicago, my hometown, and they know what works and what doesn't to get the changes needed. Incentives, they do the all-important financial analyses to make the case that, hey, city managers, you will actually save money if you do this, as well as, help solve a crisis. One of the key features is part of my own field of behavior analysis. Dr. Pietras, who's often on this call too, and part of our working group and coalition, is in that same field. And here at Western, we have several experts in the psychology department who are specialized in this area. It's called organizational behavior management. So they may be able to serve as resources. There's a lot in the book about the essential metrics where you can see where you are now, and here's a goal, and here's, we're making progress and, ensuring that, and what are the barriers. That's really important too. And there's all kinds of ways that we can work with local government. And of course, if we do get a sustainability director for our region, like we're trying, then, you know, that person will probably already be well up on this book and hopefully will belong to this network, which has a lot of useful resources. The people who wrote this book founded this network. What would be really nice is if we could just tell all the organizations and governments and neighborhood leaders all the accurate information about the climate crisis, what we need to do, and that would be enough, right? They would see, oh yeah, we need to make these changes. Obviously, that has not been sufficient. So the next step is to try and have some kind of intervention, some kind of project that will motivate people. And what are the barriers to these projects at the community level? Well, two of them were highlighted by this APA task force recently, and behavioral scientists have a lot of ways to help us and organizations get around these old habits that, you know, in the developed world is just built around this fossil fuel infrastructure. And this is not something that you change overnight or easily, as we see. So we have ways to help ease that transition to green habits. And also, I know all of us on this call regularly feel the sense of futility that is just such a huge problem. There's so much we need to do. We are running out of time, you know. And so that's a motivation challenge. And there are lots of ways that behavioral scientists have of helping with that too. Because, you know, just sitting on our hands in despair is not going to help, right? You know, it's understandable though. Still, this is where we need to get to, again, new green habits so that people and organizations do what we need to do automatically because it's a habit. And new social norms, you know, supporting that with all these social reinforcers that help get the change going. There's a lot of natural rewards for living sustainably, including things like financial, where you save money if you turn down the heat in the winter, or if you buy an Energy Star appliance. The natural reward of the endorphin rush you get when you're a commuter cyclist, as I was for 20 years, you know, eating in a more eco-friendly fashion is also better for you. If you're trying to lose weight, it may help with that too. I mean, you know, yeah, you may feel better, right? So again, that has not been sufficient so far either. So one of the go-tos here is as much part of biology as it is of psychology, and that's the learning principles that people in my area focus on. Again, it's called behavior analysis or behavioral psychology, and it's a very well-established, well-quantified science. And I'm just going to go over some of the more basic principles like positive reinforcement, everyone's favorite. And there's all kinds of applications. I go over some of this in this article from last year in this interdisciplinary behavioral sustainability journal for anyone who's interested. This is relatively non-technical because this is such an interdisciplinary area. Consequences, when they depend on behavior, have a lot of influence, and it gets very complicated very quickly. These are just a sampling. This is just a sampling of the many dimensions that apply. These are all very well researched, but you don't need to know a lot of the more abstruse areas to make a difference. The go-to for many policymakers for these projects is just pay people to do the right thing, right? Financial incentives have a valid place in our toolbox here because so often they do work. I own a used electric vehicle, a Chevy Bolt that I love, and I got a rebate for buying that. And rebates work. Energy Star appliances, you know, yeah. So utilities often use time of use pricing to provide financial incentives for people to use electricity at low use times. It just helps with their supply. Vermont these days is getting heat waves like everybody else, and this has created a problem for one of their largest utilities because they've had to go outside of their normal supply sources to get electricity and had to pay more. And they were having to pass that along and no one was happy. So they tried time of use pricing, which usually does work. People in Vermont had to pay more during the summer in the afternoon and early evening so that they would crank up the air conditioning a little less and the utility could meet its goal. And usually this does work. In this case, it totally failed. Vermonters were simply willing to pay more to be comfortable. So the utility tried something a little different. They tried a group reinforcer. And this is Vermont, it's a small state, right? They can do this. They told all their customers that if as a group that they could keep their peak demands during the next heat wave below this certain level, that they would donate $1,000 to a local animal shelter. And obviously the charity has to be non-controversial. And they had little marketing campaigns for this. People talked about it and thought it was really cool. Utility provided feedback, and this worked. And the next heat wave, the charity was a domestic violence shelter, and that worked too. This was cheaper all around too, and it kind of gives you hope for human nature. Another ubiquitous learning principle involved in these sorts of interventions is feedback, which actually has multiple behavioral functions, multiple learning principles involved there. This is illustrated by this early Prius dashboard, where for the first time, drivers could get information about fuel economy in real time. And people found this really rewarding. They started driving more efficiently because they got the immediate rewards of seeing the miles per gallon level, shoot up. I mean, it's fun. Some people found this so rewarding, unfortunately, that sometimes they even push the limits of safety to accomplish really astonishing levels of fuel efficiency. And that's the hypermilers. If you've never heard of them, yeah, they will sometimes even draft on semis on the freeway, which is not a good thing. Before COVID, they were meeting every year and they would have a competition in the same, model Prius, for example, to see what levels they could achieve. And if we were in person, I would ask you to throw out guesses. We've got limited time here, but just kind of think about what level you might guess, maybe put in the chat what you think might be possible in a Prius. In 2019, the last year that they did this before COVID, and it has a gas tank as well as the battery, right? Yeah, just really astonishing. The power of immediate reinforcement. Okay, another common learning principle that you see in use is shaping, where you need to keep in mind as someone designing these things that meet people where they're at and then work them up gradually. It's kind of like, the cold, warm, hot game you may have played when you were a kid. Technically, shaping is the reinforcement of successive approximations to a target behavior. So for example, if you and your organization, your business, your nonprofit, whatever, wants to get more employees biking to work or carpooling or taking the bus, then you can't expect people to make that change overnight. They often need assistance and information, and it helps a lot if you do get someone who bikes to work for the first time, if they get a lot of attention and support for that, and then you work from there. And some companies, like apparently Bronson, like we heard about in this group a few weeks ago, have systems like that. In conferences, I've heard about companies that have like badges if you start doing it at least once a week, and some perks and things and recognition. And then also everyone sees in the company, once we're back in person anyway, yeah, people are really doing this and here's the benefits. And this is even, I think, a better example with getting people to eat more of plant-based meals, because you can't expect someone who's been eating meat their whole life for most meals suddenly to become vegan overnight. It just doesn't happen. I've got a good friend in the environmental movement who's never ever tried tofu, and I don't think ever will, but that's okay. If you can get a meat-eating friend just to try a veggie burger once and show a lot of appreciation for that, then you work up from there. And these Impossible burgers are really astonishing. They taste so much like the real thing, and they do have less of a carbon footprint. work up to meatless Mondays, etc. I myself am now mainly vegan. I do still eat sustainable seafood. This was a multi-year process, but now I really like it. Okay, another feature here is due to the way that the relationship between behavior and consequences and signals that are in the environment during all this interact in very complex ways, again, that we do understand. In most cases, it doesn't work like with looking out the window at a nice view where every behavior gets the consequence. It's like a one-to-one relationship. We call that a continuous schedule of reinforcement. In real life, those are pretty rare. Usually the relationship is more complex. It's often variable, like when you're fishing, and you might have to cast 3 times or 30 times to get rewarded with a strike. And it's unpredictable, and that helps keep you casting because the very next time might be successful, right? Also, with the way signals work, if you see a bunch of little fish jumping, that's a signal that there's probably some bigger fish underneath that are worth casting for. So you want to cast over there and at that time. And so signals work into this too. And again, we got all this quantified. This is why variable schedules of reinforcement are so powerfully motivating that they can create gambling, quote, addictions, because the very next push of the button on the slot machine may get you a big payoff. We see this in real life all the time, more positively for stream cleanups. I have done them. How many of you have done like a stream cleanup or a highway cleanup, right? There we go. And so there's the reward from working in a group where you got the social reinforcers, but there's also nothing like the rewarding attention you get when you find a really cool piece of litter. And it might be right around the next bend, right? It's a variable schedule of reinforcement. So designers of these interventions build these things in. Here are 2 very popular ways, and Chris Jones at Berkeley and Cool, California has a review of these using lotteries or competitions for sustainability in that same journal I published in just a few years ago, if anyone's interested in more. I'm also going to be giving another example later on. I'm going to start, though, with a classic from my field from the 1970s, when people were, Earth Day, 1970, right? Suddenly there was a lot of research on this stuff, including with this trucking company, which had 200 drivers. And really the owners wanted to save money on fuel, but of course, lots of benefits for air pollution and the climate crisis if drivers drive more efficiently. So here's the baseline level here on the left. I'll see if I can get my cursor there. Okay, I'm not seeing my cursor anywhere. That's okay, there we go. 4.8 miles per gallon. Really, really bad. All these decades later, these semis still only get between 6 and 7 miles a gallon. Thank goodness for the 6 states that now have mandated a gradual switch to electric trucks, which are already out on the road. But meanwhile, the intervention here was a training session, how to drive more fuel efficiently. Here's all the benefits for the company. And if you succeed, you get a nice letter of approval in your file from your supervisor. So we see that fuel economy, okay, here's my cursor again, went up, and then, okay, here, and then it didn't last. Here in this phase, they added extra social rewards, more attention. That helped a bit. Then the next phase, that short one, they reversed back to the baseline and it went down. And then what actually worked, which was a weekly lottery. People love those lotteries. And in this case, then it was weekly at first, and then there's a natural progression to new green habits and maintaining the behavior change, because they went to biweekly and then to a monthly lottery. And eventually, I'm sure we're able to discontinue it entirely, because what we want is for the new green habits to be well established. And so variable schedules work really well for that too. What gets me about this is what they used for the incentives that you could win for the lottery, because these were not fancy things like dinner at a nice restaurant. Instead, they were things like, and I kid you not, pen sets with the company logo. It's just astonishing. It doesn't take much sometimes. Yeah, the power of variable schedules. Okay, this is another learning principle that has been well incorporated in behavioral economics, which is the major interdisciplinary approach taken in this interdisciplinary area. I'm proud to say that people in my field of behavior analysis are the ones who came up with this hyperbolic model that describes this relationship, like for that classic marshmallow study, you know, 1 marshmallow now, 2 marshmallows in 15 minutes for kids is hard. And of course, so that the longer a delay, the lower the value of the consequence. You know, just like $100 now is worth a lot more for most people than $100 in a year. And so the drop off at first is fairly rapid and then it levels off. I'm not going to go into more details about that study, but that's very characteristic. This describes a lot of how the climate crisis happened in the first place, because so many of the worst consequences are delayed. You know, they're going to be 10, 20 years down the line. And so it's hard for people to be influenced by that when there's such a long delay. So behavioral scientists have come up with lots of ways of bridging those delays, which are really critical. Okay, anything we could do to establish new habits, like the trucking example I just showed. Okay, new social norms, establishing that helps. Making a commitment or a pledge, especially when someone else knows. But there's just a lot of satisfaction for most people when we meet a commitment that we have made, and that can really help. I'm going to give some examples. And this one, I think, does not get used nearly enough. People in the US need to know that our carbon footprint per capita has gone down. I mean, not that long ago, it was 18 metric tons carbon dioxide equivalent per person per year. Now we're down to like 15 and a half. This is significant. I mean, yeah, we're still one of the worst in the world, but you know, we're making progress. That helps fight that sense of futility too. This helps people lose weight on diets, right? This is built into a lot of gamification methods. And let me talk a little bit about ways to make sustainability fun now then, to take advantage of some of these learning principles. Here's one that's been used with a medium-sized business. I'm going to show you the data next, where happy chickens, if you save energy, and really unhappy, sick, dying chickens, I mean, it makes you feel bad, doesn't it, to look at that chicken on the left if you waste energy. So there was a whole game element here where you could build up eggs in your nest. I believe that this game is available for free or for a nominal charge, because I've been in email contact in the past with the guy who created it with the DOE money. As you can see, 42 employees over 12 weeks, they really saved a significant amount of energy and everyone liked it. And hey, you got to play this game at work. So this might be something that we could help get out to. Any kind of organization could do this. And then hopefully it generalizes, you know, to what they do at home too. Okay, and just quickly, this is from my field of behavior analysis from the end of the last millennium. For a stretch, maybe still all schools in Ireland were using this, using good learning principles, including role models and videos and shaping techniques and teacher praise and the pens with your favorite food dude superhero on them too, or little toys too. This is for elementary school kids to get them to eat their veggies. And if you get good dietary habits established when kids are young, it's likely to maintain. This gamified approach, which only took 3 weeks, was designed really more for kids' health and nutrition, but obviously it benefits the climate crisis too, because then people are more likely to have more plants in their diet, which we really need to move toward. So over 3 weeks, you can see that in the experimental group, kids' consumption of vegetables at lunchtime almost tripled. So this is actually used in various school districts around the world, including some in California. There's others like it out there too that also have a lot of evidence-based support. And I don't know if we have any of that locally, but if we don't, that might be worth considering. You can sell it by the health and nutrition issues too, may be more effective. Okay, at the college level, this is a classic study, and I know the guy who ran this too. We've met at conferences. Oberlin had dorms compete against each other over 2 weeks for a pizza party to get them to cut back their electricity use. And they got feedback like once a day. This was not high tech. This was not expensive. In the graph I'm going to show you, higher numbers are better. And by the way, so dorm residents supported each other. So you've got those group psychology elements going for you, plus dorm rivalries for motivation, and bragging rights. And higher numbers are better. And for a pizza party, 5 dorms succeeded in cutting back their electricity use by over 50%. It's just humongous. And this was inexpensive. This, I think, also would not be hard to replicate. And at the school district level, some of the same principles used here, again, teams. So you have the social reinforcers and brainstorming. And the teams included faculty, staff, and students working together. And again, you had school rivalries for who could save more energy. Public recognition is a very effective reward for most people, and it's very inexpensive. This was not an expensive program. And yes, it took a while, but over a decade there, they saved over $5 million that went into school programs instead of to carbon pollution. And there's lots of programs like that. I'm going to now share some from the Tools of Change website again, because lots of these never get written up in the scientific literature. You have to find out about them from being local or going to conferences or places like Tools of Change, which I will say also I am now affiliated with. Again, it's freely available. I do it pro bono and all that, I got involved with it because they incorporated that article that I wrote last year into their topic resources and then asked me to serve on the study section. So, they give you all the information in these case studies, which also include experiments and quasi-experiments that you need to replicate at the community level. These are all behavior change or mainly behavior change, some attitude change, also projects at the community level, business, school districts, local government, et cetera, neighborhoods, everything, right? So this was for K-12 schools, like we just saw. There's a bunch of approaches out there that we could try and replicate, and there would be people to help us and lots of resources. And in this case, this was quite a large-scale effort that did require a lot of funding, but they did save a lot of energy. You can see top 17 elementary schools in fall of 2018 saved 10 to 15%, and that's really substantial. And again, bottom line here, that money was available for other purposes. That's a good way to sell this, I think. Okay, and then this is funny because Mary Ann Renz just recently shared this with me about Solarize and these Tupperware kinds of parties that Denise mentioned at the beginning. And then I was checking the case studies list to see what would be good for this presentation. And there's Solarize, it's in here, and it really can help. And they had this nice summary chart showing how many megawatts now have resulted of solar energy in neighborhoods from this kind of program. And there's this Midwest Renewable Energy Association Grow Solar program. I don't know if that includes Michigan or not. Some of you maybe know about that. Please mention that in the Q&A. Maybe we can be part of it, but you could see that it's pretty substantial. For saving energy at the homeowner level with energy efficiency, I did the consumers program for my home here in Kalamazoo, which is pretty good, but you really have to go beyond that for more serious energy savings, like with efficiency, if you want serious savings. And this Fort Collins program really does that, makes it easy. And that's something that we can try and replicate too. Again, there's just a zillion of these things. I know someone in Fort Collins who may have a contact here. And again, in the Tools of Change website, all the data, the barriers, how they overcame them, lots of hyperlinks, resources and all that. So everything you need, they kind of try and make it easy. And then this program for organizations, including businesses and local government in this case, to get employees to do like what Bronson did, to do less solo driving and more carpooling or van pooling, public transit and biking to work. And in this case, they had two sets of incentives. And I'm going to show you the data here. Let me walk you through this. Higher numbers here are better. It's more employees who are participating in the program and not driving in a vehicle on their own. You know, they're at least carpooling or doing one of the other green transport options. And for some reason, they don't show us the baseline here, but the baseline is low. So this first stage here is where they used a lottery. This is another lottery approach to save money for the city. And if you started using alternative transit, then you were eligible. And in the main program, you could get 2 to 4 hours off. You know, so like take off Friday afternoon, for example, if you did this and won the lottery. So again, low baseline, and then okay, I'm trying to get my, there we go. This first stage here before that dashed line, you could see that a lot of people are doing this. And then they go back to baseline here, except for the red ones. I'll talk about that in a second. It's a lot lower. And then here, so this is a reversal design, we call this. Here they incorporate that lottery for the time off again at the end here. And you can see it goes right back up again. So scientific documentation, this really works. Their other approach was also a kind of lottery thing, a competition. In this case, you could win a $50 gift card, not time off. And so all of the red outlines here are when they do that. And you can see those do tend to be higher, right? Not so much here, but then here, the big difference, you know, when they have that versus when they don't have that. But overall, clearly, the opportunity they have 2 to 4 hours time off is a much bigger incentive, although the gift cards certainly help too. And note, this was not expensive for the city to do, because not like you gave everyone who did it a gift card, right? That's the way that lotteries and variable schedules generally let you leverage your limited resources to get the most impact. So that's something that could be incorporated again. Local governments, any of them could do it. Even people who can't ride public transit or bike can do carpooling, right? Okay, so the challenge for us is prioritizing what we do. And I know all of us face that. And it's just like hair pulling time, frankly, because it's so hard to know what's going to work. And here again, Mackenzie Moore's book comes in handy. He's got a whole chapter on this. I attended a session at the conference just on this, quantifying potential impact, probability of adoption and existing levels, which enable you to make intelligent choices. But that takes a fair bit of effort in itself. Most people end up kind of, you know, guessing, which is what we did for my Climate Action Coalition that I'm going to talk about shortly. Anyway, you also need to take into account the likelihood of generalization, like with the energy chickens. Once people started saving energy at work, you know, and using less electricity, hopefully that generalized to doing that at home too. Some things are more likely to generalize than others. Okay, so I'm going to talk about an effort that we had, a two-pronged effort on vehicle idling. It's funny you mentioned that, Denise, at the beginning too, because that's something that I have spent an inordinate amount of time on in California. Again, I co-founded and co-chaired this Climate Action Coalition there, and my co-chair and I decided as one of our priorities, again, we did a lot of other things too, but one of our priorities was something we thought would be a relatively easy win-win-win, which was vehicle idling. California Central Valley, that's where I was from, in Stockton, has a huge problem with air pollution. That's why I moved. And it's especially bad for kids. You know, it just asthma is an epidemic there among kids, really. And so air pollution is a very big issue in kids' health. And so by cutting back on idling at school pickup and drop-off spots, then it's a win-win-win, right? You don't even have to mention climate change. People are on board, you would think, right? So every region in California has an air pollution control district. It's such a big problem in the state. So our local one had all these signs that every single school in our county, and it was a big county, over twice the size of Kalamazoo County. Every single school had these signs available to post at their pickup and drop-off spots, and very few did so. So we thought, my co-chair and I of the coalition, that we would work on the schools and just spread the word generally. And we lobbied the vice mayor of Stockton, who was on board. We lobbied the superintendent of schools for the county, gave us half an hour on this. Why aren't they posting the signs? Why can't we have action on vehicle idling? We also presented to the monthly meeting of all the school superintendents in the county, which is about 10 or 12, something like that. And everyone thinking, okay, yeah, this is a good thing. And still, a lot of schools did not post. We actually then, I think, were a significant factor in getting a new regulation passed that there should be no idling zones for these pickup and drop off areas. And then COVID happened because we were starting to take data. Okay, how many more schools are putting up their signs and all that. So hopefully it had some impact. But I could tell you, we were tearing our hair out, thinking just calling the schools, maybe contacting a few PTAs would be enough. No. Something as easy as posting these signs in that picture turned out to be extremely challenging and extremely frustrating for us. And the other thing we did with idling in the schools was program recruitment for Idle Free California, which was based on a successful project in Vermont, which had a lot of data behind it. I have now been for several years on the board of this organization. It's a nonprofit. It's now called Green Driving America. It's a great program. You have a science class usually in middle school, but it can be lower grades too, and also high school. And then kids take data on the amount of idling at the pickup and drop off spot at their school. And then we have the campaign, and then the kids approach the parents when they're dropping off kids and get them to sign pledges not to idle their vehicles. For anyone who's not aware, you don't need to idle your internal combustion engine vehicle more than 10 seconds. That's from the manufacturers as well as independent science. It's better to turn off the engine and turn it back on again. A lot of research there. The students handed out informative flyers, got the pledges, and then before and after data, and quite typically 40 to 50% less idling. And hopefully, again, that generalizes to no idling elsewhere. And again, it's a really good program, I think. And there's all kinds of support for this. There's no cost to the schools. It doesn't cost much to run, period. And we tried really hard, my co-chair and I, to get some of our local schools to adopt this. And after a great deal of effort, we got one high school teacher in the whole large county. Yeah. So again, I don't know, was it worth all the time and effort we put into this? I don't know. It's such a challenge. But there are clearly a lot of good programs out there. I'm getting to the end now. Just quickly, I'm going to summarize some of the behavioral science principles that apply, and then go over some projects that, from my very limited perspective, being here only 6 months at this point, that we might consider. And I'd love to brainstorm about this and help do what we can at this community level. Okay, all of this kind of no-brainers really. And again, I think we really should be doing more to celebrate the progress that we've made. People need to know that when they make these changes, it does make a difference. Okay, this is still something we can meet according to the IPCC. Giving people and organizations choices, not every organization has to have a transit program, right? Not every person has to be vegan, right? That's empowering in itself. It's rewarding in itself when you have control. And again, my main message here, let's use what's already out there. There's no need to start from scratch at this point. Implementation really is the challenge. There's a whole implementation science. there's too many options really again, but it's good to have lots of good options. This is one source of resources I thought I'd throw in here. ACEEE, American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. Many of you will know, I worked with them on the city scorecard for Stockton. There's a lot of resources for where the low-hanging fruit is in your area to get these changes. The nearest city in Michigan that has a rating is Grand Rapids. And actually they do reasonably well. Okay, Bronson, again, spreading the word on that, which I know that local business organization is trying to do anything we could do with that. For those of you who are not aware, by the way, Kalamazoo has an air pollution problem too. It's better than the Central Valley that I moved from, but Purple Air has a lot of data on that. That's actually, I think, better than a lot of the government sites, and we need to do more with that because that helps drive the change, like away from gasoline-powered lawn equipment, which puts out more greenhouse gas emissions in California now than the cars do. It's terrible. Those leaf blowers. Okay, we can help share what we have been successful with other cities. And thanks again to Mary Ann, who shared with me recently the newsletter of Ann Arbor Sustainability Initiative. I was blown away. So we can learn from them. They can learn from us. Again, not reinventing the wheel. Here's some good projects I think that I'd love to see going on here, and I'd be happy to help with. We had a demonstration garden run by our local University of California extension group in Stockton and California. It was not at a university, it was at the local ag site, and it was really well done. There was someone there who could answer questions. And I haven't found anything like that here yet, but I think that would be valuable. And I'd love to see more billboards because people need to be reminded, all those people in the middle, who don't take much action, but would if they were reminded that, yeah, we're making a difference and we really need to move faster, and more feedback on progress. I would love to see billboards with this, for example, and I will stop there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Susan. Wow. If you want to stop share, we'll give the round of applause.
Okay.
Everyone here knows how it works. Yay! I gotta find my little clapper. Thank you, Susan. Wow, you covered a lot of ground. I know it's almost one, but hopefully if folks are willing to stay for 5 or so minutes, maybe talk about questions. Not a lot of questions in there. I think I found the links for tools of change and the chicken game, as we will now lovingly call it here in Kalamazoo after your presentation. But maybe we could discuss some of the ideas for how we might utilize these concepts Susan is talking about right here in Kalamazoo. What folks think about some of the ideas? Where can we go with this?
Too many options.
Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, the signs on the no idling, I noticed, they didn't seem as friendly as what Denise's student presented this morning, what the Illinois EPA had. Kid say that signs like "Be idle free for me" and "No idling, children breathing." The images on the signs were more appealing. So from a psychological standpoint, I mean, that could make a difference, possibly.
Absolutely, yes. And ideally, you do testing ahead of time with different options to see what works with the audience you're trying to reach. And by the way, I did work a bit on a billboard campaign with the Union of Concerned Scientists, which has done climate change billboard campaigns. And that's something that we could try to do. Yeah, it got to a certain stage and then it didn't actually happen, but I know some of the basics with how you could bring that about.
Yeah. Well, I know we've tried the dashboard idea. Oh, sorry, Deb, were you going to ask a question?
I was just going to ask if you started with the school boards with that initiative, or did you start with individual schools?
Right. We did everything all at once. And one of our steering committee members helped too, who was a teacher in the largest school district and knew some of the custodial staff because they're often the ones who actually post the signs. Right. So it was multi-pronged.
Yeah. was going to say, I know we've tried to institute a psychology student. I did some of the dashboards at Western for building energy use, right? And being able to make those connections. I really like, it's an interesting, I always think, interplay between competition and cooperation, and that it takes a little maybe bit of healthy competition for us to truly cooperate is one of the ways that I read the literature, which is probably wrong. But there is this idea of, all those examples of getting the public recognition and the pledges and benchmarking yourself, really, right, is what dashboards, is what being able to see your progress against others really is all about. And that social reinforcement, as long as it's positive, like you're saying, is so powerful. And so I'm trying to kind of brainstorm about what kinds of things might we do there. And I think probably still, Donna, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably the most engagement we've ever gotten on social media was the eating challenge we did 2 years ago when Jonathan Safran-Foer was here, and we did a month-long calendar of like, what are you doing? And it was great, because that's one I'm terrible on. Like, I don't have a car, but food is a really hard one for me, and people loved, I think, seeing me fail the challenge every day. My students did, at least. But it, because you got a little bit of competition, but you got to sort of share. So I wonder if we should do some more challenges like that, is sort of what I'm thinking after hearing you talk again. Go ahead, Nikki, what are you thinking?
It might be worth a try. And that article by Chris Jones that has a review on competitions and lotteries is a really valuable resource in that regard. Yeah, in that journal, Energy Research and Social Science.
Thank you.
I was wondering if any work has been done with the delivery services, FedEx, Amazon, the dashboard, DoorDash, whatever, because they don't turn off their vehicles when they're making deliveries, and a lot of them, like for me, they park down on the road, and then they walk up my driveway, and then they walk back down, much more than 10 seconds. So I was just wondering, has there been a push to deal with the companies themselves along those lines?
Yes, I'm more familiar with attempts to deal with trucking companies. And sometimes for the vehicle, it depends on if it's diesel or gasoline. With diesel, the story's a little different, although there are still ways for them to cut back on the idling, right? Yeah, I had that same reaction, Nikki. I do know that some companies have their system set up so that there's like an automatic cutoff, like the new cars, a lot of the new vehicles have a system. I forget, it's like stop something, where if you're at a long traffic light, the idling will stop automatically, and then it picks up again as soon as your engine comes on again, as soon as you hit the accelerator. And delivery vehicles and transport vehicles, trucks, are sometimes set up with that too, or they've got some kind of computer way of managing that, because I know someone who drives for a company where he does other work, but he has a company truck, and the company wants to save money on fuel, especially these days right now, but even before then. And so even if the driver doesn't turn off the truck, after a longer period of like 30 seconds or a minute, something like that, it will go off automatically. So we could, I'm sure there are efforts like that, right, with FedEx and UPS, I agree. If there's any issue there, though, that it would take longer to start the vehicle back up again. And for some vehicles, that might be an issue if they're diesel. Then the problem is that they're monitoring these drivers so closely, every second they know where they are and what they're doing and all. And so for them, any loss in time is a real barrier to turning off the engine when they make a delivery. Yeah, I don't know. Does anyone know more about it than I do? It's a really good question, Nikki.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit the one of our newer affiliates is West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum, and one of their initiatives and ideas was to run a campaign maybe this summer that would talk about kind of the reward idea, right? And so how could we support businesses that are utilizing sustainable or that do have climate plans, and what kind of and so I'd be curious to work with you, Susan, and think about, well, is it like, is it a sticker? Is it the public recognition? Is it the challenge piece? Like how would you like thinking about that business piece that I know they want to work on with us? What would be the thing that you would do? Do we need a decal in everybody's window? But people shop online. I don't even know where would we start maybe to develop what a business positive recognition campaign could look like?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the problems is that, as we know, there's a fair bit of greenwashing out there. And so that's a problem because a lot of members of the public see this and they don't know how to distinguish, right? But certainly there are a lot of successful models, clearly. And here with organizations like Bronson already having so much success, maybe it's just a matter of local connections where you can take advantage of the ones that already exist. And the fact that it's local is a big plus, and being able to serve as a resource and all of the benefits that come for the company that then, they can advertise this, that they are following up and being a good civic members of the community.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it looks like, thank you, Bo and Jenny, our Promote the Vote folks are going to work on their Portage School Board for you. So this is how a coalition works, right? You never know what idea, who you're talking to and who might pick that up. Marianne, thanks. Citizens Climate Lobby National Call is tomorrow on Rewiring America. Boy, that's going to take some positive reinforcement. I think we should give Susan our final round of applause here, and anybody that really needs to go can bug out, and I will stop the official recording here.